Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1.
We're streaming on Facebook.
I think that's what that means. I think it's working again.
Nice. All right. Well,
here we are.
Good to see you.
Podcast number 2.
Nice.
We're talking over each other.
Cool. No, we're talking near each other. We're next to each other. So we are here doing the Living NLP podcast once again. We're just two cats who love NLP and hypnosis, who live NLP and hypnosis, and we're just here talking shop, talking shit, talking shop. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Pull back the curtain, show you how it works.
Nice. So how have we structured this?
Oh, yeah. So we have a kind of basic structure. We're meeting every Friday, roughly, and talking about each one of us is picking an anecdote, meaning like a story about how we were using these tools and techniques in some capacity in the last week. So most of the time it's going to be stories about us working with clients, but it might be stuff in our own lives or something we worked with a friend or family or somebody we randomly met on the bus somewhere. So we're coming up with an anecdote each and a quote each because we're both voracious and avid learners and we're constantly absorbing stuff that is either directly about NLP and hypnosis or at least related to these ideas. So we're going to pick a quote from something that we're reading and enjoying and then pontificate on that. And then we're going to answer questions. So if you are listening to this right now or at any time, or you're tuning in live with us or you're watching the recording at some point in the future, submit some questions. Put in the comments down below wherever you are on YouTube or Facebook or whatever's going on. Ask us questions that you might have about NLP, coaching, hypnosis, or any life questions or philosophy questions or psychology questions or stuff that you want us to answer for you.
Yeah.
That's
Things like, how do you get your beard that long? Because that is longer than any beard I've ever had. Good for you.
I know. I'm kind of digging it.
It's what we call froth.
I'm keeping the sides trim and letting this part go down. It's a little devilish.
I'm sure it's a metaphor for something. Nice. So why don't you go first? You want to do the anecdote or the quote?
Sure. I went first last week. You go first.
Oh, okay.
I'll make you do the anecdote first.
Cool. So my anecdote was going to be something different, which I'll just save for another time because, I mean, they're just so good. I have so many anecdotes, and that's part of why we're here. It's like I just want to share these little droplets of change and let them spread.
This is what you and I would do when we just get on calls anyway.
Right. So enjoy us, won't you? So, but this week, I finally got to sending out or notifying people about a change that one of my clients had, and it's this woman named Diane Allen, and she gave a TEDx talk, and it's all about owning her A game, and it went very well. And a little backstory is that, so Diane was a professional musician, professional violinist, like a concert master, which sounds badass anyways, but a concert master is like first chair. It's like the tippy top of the orchestra, like right next to the conductor. She's the concert master, and she was a concert master, and she'd done it for years. I mean, the amount of practice that goes into like to be that good at something is fucking insane. Yeah. And also, to be that good at something can also require like sucking the life and the fun and the pleasure out of it, because music, like so many other things, is very analytical, and at the highest end, when you're looking at basically a piece of music that looks like a black page of just like notes all over the place, you got to get it right. You got to do it to somebody's like, it becomes very analytical and almost robotic and machine-like. And she had gotten super stressed out about it and burned out about it. So cut to, she's calling me now because she wants to start her speaking career. She wants to talk about owning her A game. She knows so much of this stuff and she wants to help people do that. And I'm like, oh, wow. How cool that you've got this experience as a concert master, as like a prima ballerina, a violinist. And she's like, no. But really, she was like, fuck no. There's absolutely zero way. In fact, I got rid of my violin. I'm like, really? Okay.
Whoa.
And in my mind, I'm going, I'm going to get you to play that violin again, girl. And even though
you saw it already.
Even though it's not my place to put my boat in anyone's stream, I'm going, in my mind, I'm going, you're going to play that violin.
Yeah, sometimes you just see it and you're like, oh, I know how this story ends.
You're going to play it so hard. So through some coaching of mine and through some kicking and screaming of hers, we resolved some things. And it was never like, you're going to play that violin. It was more just like, what if you could have this in a new way? What if you could find mastery? Because her whole thing is owning her A game. Yeah. And she was going to go up there and talk about being a concert master, but having thrown her violin in the trash and not be able to look at it. And I was like,
dude,
eesh, you know? Yeah. So one day she calls me and says, I just bought a violin. And I was like, oh, that's rad. She goes, I bought an electric violin. It's all like cool looking. And I was like, that's how. She's like, I'm rediscovering music and I'm learning to play again. And so I don't know if I properly said it then, but I'm just going to say it for all the world to hear now. I told you so! But it makes me so happy to know that she was able to access this resource. I mean, my goodness, a lifetime of mastery that she can now have in a different way is like so much of what I love to do about helping people associate to their resources and own their A game. And so much of her thing like matches with my thing. And then she gave me this beautiful testimonial, and she gave a daggum TEDx talk looking like a badass. I mean, she already knew how to talk. I didn't teach her how to be a speaker. I taught her how to own that part of herself that was the mastery of a particular skill that she was then using to help other people own their A games. It was wonderful. It's why I love what I do. So thank you for letting me share that. And thank you, Diane Allen, speaker, who is a badass, whom you should look at. I don't have her thing off the top of my head.
Well, if you go on YouTube and search Diane Allen TEDx, you're probably going to find it, right?
I hope so, yeah. Or Diane Allen speaker. So she wouldn't mind. Go look at her, see how great she is, see her owning her A game, and just know that. So
there's something so I think very universal about that. Falling out of love with something, and then the incongruency that it creates if you're going to get up on stage and talk about like this, like what is this supposed to be, your like sordid past that you don't speak of?
Right,
no, this is an amazing thing, and you fell out of love with it. And I love that you emphasize the word play music.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be play.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and now she's out there playing and showing people how to play, and I love it. And what I love about what we do is, I know you've said the same thing to someone at some time, is I love helping people. I also love helping people who help people, because then I can take credit for all the good that they're doing.
Yeah.
And then all the good that those people do.
Yes.
I can be like, that was me.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point. So like, where should you focus your efforts? When you, as a coach, when you can help helpers, you're multiplying the impact you're having on the planet, if that's your goal.
Right. Yeah. And I know you do that as a coacher.
Yeah. One of the things that occurred to me when you were talking about that is, I don't think a lot of people understand that in order to be truly world class at something, you almost have to be a little nuts.
Yeah.
To be world class at virtually anything, you kind of have to harness an OCD kind of dragon and hope it doesn't eat you up and spit you back out.
Yeah.
And to help somebody who went on that journey and then lost this love and this flame and this passion that they had for something, I think that's amazing. Yeah, and the fact that it resulted in her going back and doing this talk is just...
Yeah, and by the way, the whole time she's doing the talk, she's using the violin as a metaphor for everything that she's talking about. It's like the central piece to the whole thing.
And she totally, that wouldn't have landed if she hadn't fallen back in love with it again.
Right, yeah. So, and again, whether I told her so or not, it's like, it makes me just so happy to get her to be able to be in love with something that she's so good at again, and to be able to change lives. It tickled me. So
can I chunk you down a little bit? What did you do with her? Like, what were some of the key insights? I mean, this is an amazing success story. I'm curious, like in the nuts and bolts, was there a single crux of what you ended up shifting?
I dare say it usually all comes down to a parts integration.
Well, just wait for my anecdote.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean? It's like of some kind or another. Right. I don't actually remember because it was a while ago offhand. But it was really just, it gets back to the purpose of why. And what did it mean? And why did you get so good? Some people learn to play the violin, and maybe they are professional. They play in the ass end of an orchestra. But why did you do, like, what brought you there? Like, all these things, you can still have all of these things. Everything that inspired you and made you want to be great, you can have all that. But if it was, you know, what were her motivations, away from or towards, right? So now they're towards. Now they're towards helping people to learn. Before it might have been, I don't want to fuck up because then I'm going to not be first chair anymore. You know what I mean? And then it's like, dude, right? But now it's like, I can show someone how to play and be a master. And, you know, she teaches violin as well. And she used to teach in a way, but she also said, I refuse to teach violin anymore, because she was teaching violin in a way that was like her old way of learning and playing. But now she's able to, like, just teach to play. And I go, well, teach that. Like, wouldn't you rather have learned what you taught yourself through our work?
Yes.
Wouldn't you want to learn that when you're a little girl learning your scales or whatever? Learn how to remember to play, remember all those stuff. You know, it's just, you can take that to anything, whether it's, you know, juggling or skateboarding or NLP.
Yeah.
The life can get sucked out of it if you try too hard to be too good, and just remember why you're doing things. And
I think that's a big part of the value of, especially for kids, learning skills, arts, practices like music, martial arts, dancing, sports even. I mean, fucking computer programming, it doesn't matter. The point is, whenever you're helping someone to develop a skill set like that, and they're learning and growing and challenging themselves, there's a meta learning, that there's an opportunity for a meta learning, which is how to train yourself to be good at something, to change yourself using pleasure instead of pain.
Yep.
And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people have stories about, I fucking hated school. Like, I'm saying this as somebody else. I was homeschooled. I didn't go to school. That's how much I hated school. Now, a lot of people have stories about, I fucking hated school, but I had one teacher who actually loved what they were teaching, whether it was a science teacher or a history teacher or an English teacher or the PE teacher or whatever. Somebody in their learning experience loved what they were doing, and they caught, it was contagious. They caught that passion.
Right.
And you teach the child at that point how to learn and how to make changes without using the stick, but instead using the carrot.
Right, because so much of whatever we do is help someone to get that carrot.
Yes.
Let that carrot be the stick.
Yeah.
You know, and to find the pleasure in something and do it for that. Like I said, so I used to skate. I currently juggle. That requires a lot of learning, a lot of mistakes, a lot of bending over and picking up. And if every time I did that, I thought, fuck, or anything,
exactly,
not good enough,
beating yourself up.
Wouldn't be any good. But if I have in my head, I have a vision, I see these masters, people that I see, I'm like, I want to be doing anything near that cool looking or whatever. And that's my goal. You know, so I got my goal, I'm associated emotionally to the goal, and I'm willing to do the work. If I can turn that work into play, then it's already there. Then I'm already going to get that goal. It's just a matter of time, which is, that's the key as far as I'm concerned.
The life metaphor is every time you drop whatever it is you're juggling is an opportunity to exercise that muscle, where the urge, the instinct for most people is, I dropped it and slap on the wrist, right? Like the piano teacher with a ruler sitting over you. No, you played the wrong note. Whack. And like, we all have that evil piano teacher in our head beating us up about what we get wrong. And when you practice something where the whole game is you're going to drop it eventually.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah. So that every single time you drop it is an opportunity to exercise the muscle of going, I'm not beating myself up.
I do consciously do that. And if I find that I'm not having fun anymore, I stop.
You stop. Yes.
I do something else and I come back. So speaking of stopping, what's your anecdote?
Okay. Mine's going to be about parts integration. I was working with a client who's been dealing with a lot of health anxiety. Particularly, he's been worried about his blood pressure. He got his blood pressure checked, and then like a fucking mind virus. The thought that my blood pressure is off became this constant panic where he got to the point where he was checking his blood pressure every day, but he didn't even want to look at the machine. Like, he wouldn't look at the results because he's like, oh no. And he had this thing about, like, I don't want to take medication. Like going and taking the medication would somehow be in it, like, I don't know, like an admission of failure or like an acknowledgement of his own mortality or something in there. So it built up and it built up. And he was avoiding going to the doctor. So he finally was, this last week, he told me before we talked, he was waking up 3 nights in a row, 2 or 3 nights in a row, with like a racing heart, like waking up from a nightmare, couldn't breathe, and was like, still like, what the fuck is going on? And then finally, he said the third night, kind of without really thinking about it, he was like, okay, fine, I'll go to the doctor. Like, that's what his unconscious wanted him to do. Right. So he finally went to the doctor and he was like, check me. Just, I can't fucking deal with it anymore. Check me. And he checked like all these different things that he was worried about. And the doctor came back and was like, you're fine. Yeah. Like, it's complete, like in the perfect range. Right. And it kind of short-circuited something because it was like, I had to point out to him, and it was like preaching to the choir, like, how much energy have you expended on this? How much have you,
oh
how
God,
much
I have such a, yes.
Okay, so there's an additional point, but you want to interject?
Oh God, I have like, so in my personal training business, I have a client, dear client, I've had him forever, and he has always been resistant to pushing any cardio level to like sweat and go, because somebody somewhere told him he had a heart murmur maybe. And so he was always afraid that he was going to give himself a heart attack if he pushed himself. And it got to the point where, like, dude, like, you're actually telling me you think you're going to have a heart attack if I make you jog? Then, and he's a friend of mine, I've been training for, I refuse to train you anymore until you go see a doctor. Because I'm not going to, are you really telling me that you don't trust your own heart? Yeah. Well, go see a doctor. And he'd been sweating about this for years. Goes to see a doctor. They're like, there's nothing wrong with you. And it did. It went, and he's like, oh, okay, I guess I'm fine. And now he can do all those things. But he had almost given himself a heart attack by thinking that there was something wrong with his heart. And for me, the metaphor was he didn't trust his own heart. Yeah. And that was like, oh my God. Like, imagine, how's that for a metaphor? I think my heart's going to kill me if I use it. So anyway,
well, chunk up on that and say, don't trust my own body. And that's a wide range of people are afraid of their own body in various ways. For me, it used to show up in like, not exercise. Like, I was very comfortable lifting heavy things, but stretching for some reason. Early in my life, I got this idea that your body is not going to be honest with you about when you're stretching too far. And so I was like, be careful, don't stretch like that or you'll hurt yourself. And so then my range of motion just started shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And it's taken me a couple of years now of really diligent effort of going into the fear that's trapped in those tight.
Say, like, what's that a metaphor for? Like, I can't stretch, I'll hurt myself.
I can't be flexible.
I can't, exactly. I can't grow because I'll break myself, all that stuff.
That's how you end up like this at like 60, 70 years old. Yeah. So this guy, he gets on the call with me, and he's lost the thing that he has been panicking about for all this time. And it's as if the part in his unconscious that has been pushing that button, the part that's anxious, the part that's anxiety, has been able to go, you know why you're anxious? Because of your blood pressure. That's why you're anxious about, and it's been the perfect way for this part to try to keep him in line or motivate him or do all this. And then as soon as the blood pressure thing went away, that part started to fucking lose it. Like, he was like shaking on the call. Like, this part doesn't know what to do. And it's like starting to, like, am I going to have a brain aneurysm? Is there going to be this? And it's like trying to find it, like, I've got a headache. Am I dying? Like, the part's trying to find something to freak out about, because that's its job. That's what it does. It freaks out. Yeah. So this kind of leads me to validate your point of like, from a certain perspective, eventually all problems can end up with a parts conflict at some level. Now, there's understanding of the way the mind works that can explain this. You can also say that maybe it's more like parts is a model that you can shove anything into.
Yeah, I mean, you can shove anything into, a submodality. Like, you can, anything can fix anything if you just
parts is just so universal and useful. So all I did, this is what ended up happening. So remember, he hasn't slept well in 3 days. He's like shaking, freaking out about all this. And I said, okay, so that part, the part of you that had this job of being anxious, and now it's lost the thing that it points to be anxious. It seems like what we need to do is that part needs a new job.
Yep.
So what kind of job should that part have? Now, granted, if you understand how this stuff works, I was doing a lot of trance work before this to try to calm his nervous system down, tune him into his unconscious. And also, I know what we've been talking about before. What we've been talking about in his life in general has largely been about purpose. Finding a purpose, finding a mission. Like, what are you here on this planet for? And whenever I talk about purpose, I talk about Joseph Campbell and the idea of following your bliss. So when I asked him, what kind of job, this part, it's really good at bringing things to your attention, right? Like when you have a twinge in your knee or something that it goes, hey, whoa, ah, and it points it out. So what kind of job could this thing do that would be more useful? And he kind of went a little bit tranced, and he said, like, he went inside and very clearly from his unconscious said, what if this part started to look for opportunities to follow my bliss? That if this part was noticing when I'm doing something or when something crosses my path that feels like bliss.
Right.
And I was like,
there you go. Ding, ding, ding,
beautiful.
Ding, ding, ding.
That's wonderful.
Maybe you should try that.
Yeah.
So, what a good idea. Yeah,
so the next day, sorry, hold on, let me wrap it up. So the next day he texts me, or so I was like, how'd you sleep the next morning? And he says, good. Woke up a couple of times, no rapid heartbeat. I feel so chill today. And he's like, dude, that was a powerful session.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, man. Parts is, I always like to say, there's a lot of the part that you thought you wanted to get rid of. When you get them back together, you realize that part had a lot of shit you needed over here. So the two of them can go up and do their thing. So
yes.
Point them in the right direction, man. That's beautiful. I love to hear that.
All devils are fallen angels. That's the principle you have to keep in mind when you're working with parts.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, sure. I steer clear of the religious metaphors, but yes.
I don't.
I know, that's good.
I dive the fuck into them.
Yeah, sure. I gotcha. Yes, Lucifer.
Okay.
So.
Quote? You got a quote? I want to hear your quote.
I do have a quote. I have several I just wanted to throw out, but just one that I'll stick with. You think I'm going to pull off some one of these NLP things or whatever, but I'm going to give you a Neil Peart quote, motherfucker.
Oh, good timing.
So, because Neil Peart just recently passed, and he's so amazing. There are a couple things I just wanted to say, and then just pick one. We don't have to necessarily talk about them unless you're like, oh my God, I love that. Let's see, we got Tom Sawyer. No, his mind is not for rent to any god or government, always hopeful yet discontent. He knows changes aren't permanent, but change is. Right? I mean, come on. It's like, you can't ask for more than that. Then I have, if you're...
Dude, you just say the word Tom Sawyer in this context, and I start getting chills.
Nice. And another really classic one, so it's so obvious, it's so obvious. My friend in high school, my buddy in high school in my class, this is his senior quote, was from Free Will, which was, "You can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice."
Oh, that's so NLP.
"You can choose from phantom fears and kindness that can kill. I will choose a path that's clear. I will choose free will." I mean,
fuck.
Come on, dude. You're in high school. You're like, "I got it all figured out now, man. Thanks, Rush." It's just so good. And if I may, so the one I wanted to actually talk about, which I think relates a little more specifically to a lot of the work I do, is a lot of the people I work with have issues around boundaries, and either they don't have them or they have built them so big and strong that they are isolated in their little world.
Or both simultaneously.
Right. And it's from the song called Limelight by Rush. And I'll just lead up to it is living in the limelight is the universal dream for those who wish to seem, but those who wish to be must put aside the alienation, get on with the fascination, the real relation, the underlying theme, right? So that's not even the quote, but like getting on with the fascination is much more along the lines of what we're talking about. But to get to the quote is, "One must put up barriers to keep oneself intact," which is a heavy line. And then he's talking about when people want to go be celebrities, and this is in 1970, whatever, 82, whenever they wrote this. But one must put up barriers to keep oneself intact. And that doesn't mean be a dick. It doesn't mean build a wall. It means for you to know who you are, you have to know where you end and where the rest of the world begins. There has to be a barrier. Every cell has a membrane, and to keep yourself intact, you have to have a barrier. One must put up barriers to keep oneself intact. Doesn't mean keep the world out. It just means you have to know who you are enough to respect your boundaries and have your boundaries respected to maintain the integrity of yourself. So thank you for listening to my Rush ramble. Any thoughts on those quotes?
The last point that you made about the put up a barrier to keep yourself intact, that's a really interesting philosophical point, because obviously from a boundaries perspective, that's true. But from a linguistic perspective, we know that that's true as well, that to name something is to put boundaries around it. And you and I have talked extensively about the value of not holding any of those boundaries too tightly, but also I think that a lot of the times that people have trouble setting boundaries, it's because they haven't spent enough time dissolving their boundaries.
True. Yeah.
And that when you can melt the boundaries of self and other and universe in various ways, that all of a sudden it becomes much easier to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right. Because if I've built up this big wall that I'm afraid to even tear down, then it just gets stronger and stronger, and I lose sensation of the world around me, and then I just become this thing that I think I'm supposed to be. And it's a very good point of both of our practice of being who you want from moment to moment, kind of a thing. Having a freedom of belief system, and being able to change from here to there to this to that, but it's still me doing that. And I know the difference between me and not me, even though ultimately I know that I am everything and everything is me. There still must be, and particularly when you're working your way into the world or trying to be, I'm going to say influencer, but I didn't mean it that way. One who influences, or someone, or a coach or something, especially in coaching, you better have a barrier or a boundary so that and even in massage, when I was doing massage, you're like, if there's no barrier, you will take their gunk. I went home one time with, I didn't have a hip issue, but I was just doing this guy's thing. And I don't know how much that's psychosomatic or what, but you take these things on, like empaths are just like, it's like, you need a boundary. I think it's a great way to say, practice changing your boundaries, shifting your boundaries, and playing with your boundaries in different scenarios. Maybe your boundaries are way out here. Maybe over here, you're just a little more protected and close to the chest. But just either way, in a lot of my work, I've found that people have gone too far into boundary land and isolated themselves, or they have gone too far into non-boundary land and lost themselves.
I wonder if a lot of the problems boil down to believing the boundaries are real. And that for me, when I started to understand that all of them are imaginary, they're all made up, that it kind of shifted something for me where I started to think about the boundaries of personality as something active. Like you actually have to, it's as if you're pushing against something, but people tend to think the boundary itself is a real thing. Like, no, that is who I am. That is what I am. As opposed to like, no, this is just what you're doing right now. And you can stop doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, I had a separate anecdote, but it just
do it.
This guy, you know, he came to me a couple weeks ago, and I'm telling him all this change that can happen, all this stuff, and we did a breakthrough, and he's like, "But we were talking about you can be whoever you want this time around, right?" Old Tim Leary line, but same thing. Like you can change who you are, and he's like, "You can do that? Like you can change your boundaries? You can? Oh." Okay, and then there you go. There, you know, just that to me is empowerment. That to me is what the whole thing is about. That's what I love to do.
Yeah.
So
I love when I think about that identity shift thing. I always think about like amnesia, or there was a movie with Tom Cruise in it called Edge of Tomorrow. Did you see it? Where he dies and then comes back. Mm-hmm. I just thought about the idea of like you go to sleep and then you wake up in the morning. And if you woke up in the morning with different memories, you'd be a different fucking person. You could forget all the bad habits that you have. Like someone who's addicted to something and they're like, oh, this addiction has been with me for decades and it's such a huge part of who they are. And then they wake up the next morning and they either don't remember who they are or they remember themselves as a different person. Those things that you think are so inextricably you can just disappear.
And you don't even need to go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So what you got?
All right, here's my quote. I'm still reading Provocative Therapy.
God, I could pull so many quotes from the last book that I had. I might just do that we'll just battle out of the same book.
Fine.
All right, what you got?
So I like this one. I think you're going to like it too. It's pretty short, but I have a lot to say about it. The psychological fragility of patients is vastly overrated by both themselves and others.
Ah, yes. Yeah, okay. What do you got?
So he goes on to say that you have to keep in mind when you're doing this type of work that you are always getting a distorted perspective of the person.
Yeah.
That you're seeing them at their worst. First of all, they're probably in a crisis or they wouldn't be fucking talking to you right now. But also, even when they talk about themselves, everything that they are saying about their life is distorted, deleted, generalized in ways to emphasize how overwhelming and impossible their problems are to solve and how terrible the trauma was that got them there. I'm not saying you shouldn't have compassion for where they are, especially because you need to get into rapport. You need to get into their model of the world. But this kind of goes back to the idea that if you think your client has a big problem, if you think, whoa, that's a big deal that they're dealing with, you should probably refer them to someone else. You can't buy it. You can buy that that's where they're at, but you have to remember that it's a Tony Robbins quote. There are no unresourceful people. There are only unresourceful states. That when people are in that place and they're talking about their problems, they will unconsciously do everything to convince you that they are incredibly fragile, that they're incredibly weak, and that they can't handle it. And you'll start to get the feeling, like I'm guilty of this many times where I've been sucked into their model of the world and I've had things that I've thought that I should say or point out, or processes that I thought, oh, that would really help them. And then a voice has said, oh, I don't think they could handle that. And in my experience, that's almost always a mistake. Almost always I've bought into their limiting beliefs about how weak and fragile and broken that they are.
Yeah. And they, whether it's tough love or some loving, like I said, like japery, some sort of like boop. Oh, really? Yeah. Well, how about boop with rapport, obviously. But a part of me is always going to be like, one of the things that you taught me when learning all the NLP stuff, when someone says, oh, I got this huge problem, you're like, cool.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, cool. What else? And so the same with like, I have clients who self-diagnosed ADHD, self-diagnosed whatever. You're like, okay, what else? Like, okay. And a lot of them, they just need to vent that shit because they got to play the role of, look at how good I've practiced my act of going in and being, you're going to be the next notch on my belt. I've never tried hypnotist before or NLP.
Your shit doesn't impress me.
No, it says, I'm like, okay. Yeah. Okay. And?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, was I supposed to run away screaming? Because you don't scare me.
When I think about that idea of shifting out of an unresourceful to a resourceful state, I don't know why this is the metaphor that I always think of, but I always imagine walking through a forest utterly exhausted, like you've run 2 marathons, like you're just 1 foot, like if you've ever been that kind of tired where just 1 foot in front of the other, and it's so hard and you're so exhausted and there's just, you got nothing left in the tank, and you're walking through a forest and then you hear a rustling in the bushes and a bear walks out of the bushes. If you put yourself in that situation, you will find that you thought the tank was empty, but it wasn't. Your body can shift to all of a sudden you are running as fast as you can down that trail. The same thing can happen where you're in a conversation, you're upset with somebody, something terrible has happened, and you're in an argument or a fight with your loved one or something like this, and then you see a small child stepping out into the street about to get hit by a car. Every single thing that that was so important to you before, that was so overwhelming, instantly gone out of your mind, and you're only focused on that one thing. You grab the kid, pull them out, they're saying thank you, and their parent is like, oh my God, I can't believe, don't ever walk into you, and you feel, and then at some point you have to remember, oh right, I was pissed off about something. What was it? I was fighting with somebody about something.
You can only have an emotion for like 30 seconds, and then you have to keep making yourself have the emotion.
Right. Yeah.
Which becomes a habit. Oh, it's my identity. I am an angry person. That's why. That's how I stay so angry all the time. But you need to keep reminding yourself of these things, these emotional states, and that's why reminding yourself to be happy, to feel pleasure, to enjoy life, to be grateful. Those are also the same things that you can do in the same way. I was grateful. Oh, now I'm grateful again.
To bring it back to the quote. When your client or you or someone you're talking to who isn't your client is convincing you or trying to convince you of how weak and fragile that they are, remember that is the state that they're currently in. That in the universe that they are in right in that moment, that's their reality. So you have to get into that reality to help them out of it, but it's not who they are. If a bear came into your office, they wouldn't be in that state anymore. It would change immediately.
Yeah.
And then the other point I was going to make with this one is the psychological fragility of patients is vastly overrated by both themselves and others. Another lesson from this for me is be honest with people. Like, radical honesty is, to me, one of the most important elements missing from the way NLP is typically taught. Yeah. And it's just one of these things where you will have thoughts cross your mind when you're working with a client where you will think, there's no way in hell I can say that. I've never fucking say that to that person. And in my experience, those are almost always the most important things you can say to that person.
With rapport and respect.
Rapport, of course.
I definitely call people on their shit. That's why they're paying me to be their mirror, and I'm going to show you.
That's what I'm talking about.
The stuff. And it's not going to, I don't make fun of them, but I can get them to laugh at themselves. This recently I had a break. This guy's, he realized, he saw the whole thing and he fucking started laughing. I'm like, what just happened? He goes, the whole thing's absurd. And I go, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
And that's why that's, to me, is the real healing power of laughter. It's not laughing at yourself for being a fucking loser. It's laughing at the ridiculousness of how you used to be, at which point, like, would you want to be that? No, are you kidding me? Like, that's hilarious. I wouldn't do that again. Right. And it's done. Yeah. And you can just like go, okay. And sometimes that takes going like, you know, I was working with this smoker and he changed to vaping. He's, oh, really? And I'm like, oh, so how do you like sucking C-3PO's dick? And he's like, what? And it finally, like, whatever that was like the thing that went, I can't answer that and respect myself. And so it was like, and finally he laughed and he goes, oh my God, it is C-3PO's dick. And he, you know, it's just one of those little things that with rapport, I wouldn't say that to just somebody on the street.
No.
You know, in the right place with the respect and enough rapport, I'm pretty good. Like, I've been the class clown distractor too far in that end for a while. You know, that was my upbringing, shall we say. And then to bring some of that, a little bit of, jab, just the right kind of jab would make them go, oh, I get it now.
It's a skill.
Yeah. So, like, yes, I agree. And that comes from not treating them like the little fragile flowers that they might perceive themselves to be, but to still respect that and treat it like a flower. But you know what I mean? To with rapport and respect, to rib them. One of my favorite quotes about rapport is, with enough rapport, you can say anything to a person. And if you say something and it doesn't go over well, you didn't have enough rapport. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have said it. Right. It means you didn't have enough rapport. And that's about changing the way you say it. But when you have those thoughts and impulses cross your mind, you should say it. They probably need to hear it. Right. They probably need somebody to have the courage. That's the thing. Nobody told me that. Honest with them. Yeah, right. So, and the fact is they already knew it. They just needed to hear it from someone else. So what do you got? Question me, my friend. All right. Okay. Let's just see if we can do a couple questions before you got to run. So first question that I found was restless leg syndrome, period. Is there an induction that exists? Question mark. An induction that exists? Question mark. Yeah, to give somebody restless leg syndrome? So my first thought on this is you're kind of jumping the gun. Like, you're assuming that that's the best way to handle it. Could it be that the way to handle someone's restless legs might be with a hypnosis process and an induction? Maybe. But I tend to go back to, well, whatever it is, we need to dig into it and figure it out. And I tend to start with really practical solutions. Things like, have you had your blood levels checked recently? Because a lot of restless leg could be nutrient imbalance. Right, or like magnesium or whatever. Like exactly, right. Yeah. Exercise. Yeah, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? How are you drinking? How are you... Yeah, what are you sleeping? What are you drinking? Right. How are you eating? Yeah. So start with the practical before you jump to the hypnotic. I totally agree. And then, yes, absolutely, there's things that you can do, but I would probably even steer towards more physiology stuff before I jump to hypnosis. So grounding exercises. Big time. And if it were to have to be like an induction, I think whoever is asking that question is fairly new to the whole thing. Right. Because there wouldn't be an induction that would fix that, because what you're doing now, that's the induction's the, and then you do the work inside the thing. But what I would say is, after having done all that stuff with the body and the grounding and all that stuff, I would get them in conversation. I would get them out of the way, and I would have a conversation with the leg. Yes. And see what that thing had going on and what it wanted to tell the world, what it was trying to say, which would probably be around get more sleep, drink more water, eat better, take better care of me. Otherwise I'll wake you up doing all this kind of stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. But that would be, I would get them in touch with their leg. Yeah. Just like your friend did with his heart. His blood pressure. Yeah, with the restless leg thing, when it comes to like specific types of exercises, I find that with me, when I've experienced that kind of thing, and with a lot of other people that I've talked to about it, it's often related to
tension and trauma in the psoas. So there's an exercise program called TRE. It stands for tension and trauma releasing exercises.
Yeah, trauma releasing exercise.
Yeah, I think they changed the name and they added
now
tension.
It's TTRE.
Yeah, it is. But they just
everybody's
use
like, I don't have trauma. I just have tension.
I know exactly. That's why they did it, because people would be like, I don't have trauma.
I'm not saying TTRE.
Yeah. So TRE, there's an app that you can download that I think is fairly affordable, and it'll walk you through the exercises. But one of the exercises that they have you do is, I can't really demonstrate it, but you're laying on your back on the floor, and you put the sharp edge of your feet down into the ground and your legs in a butterfly, and you lift your butt up off the ground, and you hold that position until you start to shake. And then you drop your butt and bring your legs in, and your legs will start to wobble like crazy. And it's very involuntary. It is an actual release of stored trauma and tension and stress in the body. And going through the exercises in TRE can actually help to bring that stuff out. I've seen that work wonders for things like restless leg syndrome.
All right.
Okay. You got another one? You got time for another one?
I do have time for another one. Sorry, I'll have questions for you next time.
All right. Yeah. So here's another one. Do you have any experience working with a client who suffers from sleep paralysis? Meaning someone who wakes up halfway and can't move. No, I don't. I've never worked with anyone with that. I've dealt with quite a lot of other sleep issues. And I've found that my general rule of thumb is that hypnosis is very effective for working with sleep issues all around. But I have a couple of thoughts around sleep paralysis initially. What are your thoughts off
I've never worked with anybody with sleep paralysis. I have worked with a lot of people around sleeping better, sleeping sounder, sleeping hygienically, all that good stuff.
Sleeping less, yeah.
Just like respecting your bedroom, all that good sleep hygiene stuff. Mm-hmm. Work life, bright lights, all that shit is super important. So I would start with all of that. And then again, it's getting in communion with that part of you in control of sleep. I have set people up in a bedroom in their mind, their ideal bedroom in their mind, and I have them watch a sunset, beautiful sunset, and then have them watch themselves sleeping soundly. Nice. Let this vision of themselves teach them what they need to learn, the behaviors they have to have. This is what sleep is. And then do it again. Let's watch that sunset again, because the sun setting is kind of like a way to... but that's like deep animal programming.
Well, the sun's exactly going down.
That's exactly beautiful. What it is. Mm-hmm. And it's like this again. Then watch yourself sleep and notice how, like, let's do it again.
Yeah.
And, do that enough times. Mm-hmm. That's what I would do. I don't know how.
So the thought that I had is that what I understand about sleep paralysis is it's not so much that I woke up halfway and I can't move. It's that sleep paralysis often is tied to an absolute terror, like an incredibly uncomfortable fear that comes up in that state when you can't move. And the only thing that made me think of is everything that I've learned about how to avoid a bad trip on psychedelics.
I thought you were going to say bondage.
No. No, that probably could be beneficial in other ways.
Right,
but
sure.
So the principal, Stanislav Grof, one of the godfathers of research on psychedelic therapy, he's famous for saying there's no such thing as a bad trip. There's only a trip that you resist.
Yes.
And when you resist it, you're effectively turning on a part of your mind, the judgmental, critical part of your mind that's saying, I don't like this. I don't want this. Stop the ride. I want to get off. And I can imagine that if you didn't take any drugs, you just went to sleep, and then you woke up and all of a sudden you can't fucking move, and you start having that thought, stop the ride, I want to get off. I can totally see how that would spiral into a panic that would be way more uncomfortable than the inability to move. So for me, one of the things you said about talking to the part, I would get in communication with some aspect of their unconscious and help to shift their state from one of judgment and resistance and fear to one of curiosity.
Yeah, man, that goes for pretty much everything.
Sure.
Sure. So does all of our solutions. They work for everything. It's just a matter of when and how. Yeah, I totally agree.
So when you're in that state and you're halfway and you can't move, if you can just surrender to it, first of all, you'll probably just fall back asleep.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like a feedback loop that happens where I can't move, and then that scares me, and then I still can't move, and that scares me even more, and it
Nicholas,
ramps up.
Relax.
Relax.
Relax now.
Yeah.
Did you ever see PCU? It's like some dumb frat comedy from the 90s or something like that. Jeremy Pivens and like one of those Saturday Night Live guys. His college roommate just standing over him going, "Go to sleep, go to sleep." Like that's not helpful.
Yeah, no one in the history of the world has ever responded positively to relax.
Go to sleep. Yeah. So just let it go.
Yeah. Self-hypnosis might be helpful too.
Yes, exactly. Because
that is what you're doing. You're learning how to shut off that critical mind.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're good.
Speaking of shutting off critical minds, we should shut our faces.
Okay. Well, let me double check and see if anybody threw any comments under the surface here.
Well, I just want to say thank you to anyone who watches and listens and cares. Thank you. It means a bunch to us that you are interested in this. We're going to keep doing it. It's just fun. We just talk about it. Are you kidding me? If I can talk about a quote that I love and some good stuff that went on that week, like I said, we're happy to do this on our own.
This is super fun, and it's getting more fun every time.
Well.
I dig it.
All right,
Peace, love, and NLP, bitches.
What you said.
All right, we're out. Later.